All right, what's up, everyone? It's Zach, and today I'm here with a very special guest. I'm here with Briley Casanova. Briley, how are you?
Hi, Zach. I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Glad to hear. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, and thanks for taking some time to be on the podcast.
Of course. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for your time in advance.
Yeah, of course. I am super excited to have you. For those of you listening back home, Briley is a fellow podcaster, which is really awesome. And I always love connecting with other podcasters and hearing about their experiences. She's also a former two-time USA Gymnastics national team member and senior team captain of the University of Michigan's women's gymnastics team. And currently, she is also a certified mental performance consultant. So, a lot of really interesting things that Briley's done and is doing, and really interesting background. So I'm excited to dive into things a bit. But Briley, do you mind kind of telling us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and your background, and all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Gosh. Well, I don't know how to follow up with such a nice intro from you, Zach. But I guess just to give a little more detail,
Yeah.
yes, I did the whole college gymnastics route at the University of Michigan. That's where I spent my college years as a gymnast. Yes, was team captain my senior year. That was really fun. And yeah, I also did the high level elite, literally elite level of gymnastics for many years. That was my life for a really long time. I think I did gymnastics for 20 years. So that was my sport of choice, my activity of choice growing up. And that's probably what led me to be where I am today. So yes, I'm a certified mental performance consultant through the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. And then I guess maybe my educational background, when I was at University of Michigan, I got my psychology degree, and then I went on to LSU to get my master's degree in sports psych. So kind of all of my experience and my academic experience led me into the sports psych career field. And so I guess what I'm doing now, just so we're on the same page here, I am a cognitive performance specialist for the Air Force, and I'm located out at Vance Air Force Base here in Oklahoma. So kind of a different but similar audience in the sense of I work with Air Force student pilots, but I also consider them to be athletes as well. So I do mental performance work with them. And that's my full-time role. And then to add on
Hmm.
top of that, my part-time role that I've maintained for almost 4 years now is I work with young female gymnasts for the most part. I get a couple other athletes here and there, different ages and different, experience levels. But I work predominantly with young female gymnasts in a virtual capacity too. So I know that that's kind of a lot. I'll stop there unless that opens up maybe some questions or maybe guides the conversation in one way or another.
Yeah. So I mean, the first question is just how do you like have free time? But no, seriously, like
Yeah.
you do a lot of different things, and it's really cool to hear kind of a little bit about each element and layer that you have going on. And something that really piqued my interest is with your regular job, working with the Air Force. You mentioned that it's similar because you consider the people that you're working with as athletes, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to answer the free time question, well,
Yeah,
you know, I, you know, that's a very interesting question, believe it or not, because
sure.
I think the amount of time we all have 24 hours in a day,
Hmm.
right? But I think how I use my time is everything is just prioritized. So in terms of the logistics behind my day to day, I am a planner.
Yeah.
I plan like every little last part of my day, literally on my Apple iCal. So
Hmm.
I'll literally write down tasks, chores, meals, like the basic human things we need to live and survive.
Yeah.
I literally put everything on my calendar. I would be nothing without my digital calendar. If you were like a pen and paper type person, maybe this is like where a day planner or a calendar would come in,
Hmm.
that type of person. But anyway, so yeah, anyway, I plan everything. I use my calendar. I would be nothing without it. Literally meals, literally every last little thing is on my calendar. But
Hmm.
I love how you can also delete and rearrange your schedule too with
Yeah.
that instead of like pen and paper. So I guess that's my logistical answer to your question. And other than
Okay.
that, it's just like pure prioritization. Some things have to I have to let go of some things and let them go by the wayside, and other things I have to move up on the priority list and do things maybe earlier than I thought
Hmm.
I would have to do. But other than that, I don't know. I hope that answers that
Yeah.
the free time question.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I think anytime that you have so much going on, it just helps to really have some sort of organization, whether it's digitally on your phone or computer or a physical, pen and paper planner. I
Mhm.
think that it's just important to have it, especially like one time, a manager told me like even just put your lunch in your
Yep.
work schedule, and it's like it seems kind of silly maybe at first, but then you realize how much that helps, just like have that like kind of sacred time blocked off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Little, even, 15-minute blocks, even like
Hmm.
setting up breaks. I mean, I will say that's something I'm not really good at is taking breaks. And that's something I share with my athletes and my Air Force student pilots all the time. And I'm guilty of not following my own advice. But now that you say that'll be my reminder to
Yeah.
plan breaks too. And I think that's something we can all improve on.
Yes, definitely. I know we live in a world that's very fast paced and it's very kind of go, go, go. And, just you can take a break later, but it's important to incorporate those in our regular day and to kind of just give ourselves the time to just like turn off the brain for even if it's like 10 minutes.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah. So with everything that you do for, your job and kind of your part-time job and just everything that you're passionate about
Mhm.
with coaching and mental performance, when you were growing up and you were an athlete yourself, did you have any sort of mental performance coach or consultant that you worked with?
That's a good question. And looking back, I knew that there was one out there and she still is out there. And I guess I should give her some credit cuz and I can't say that I know her very well.
Uh-huh.
However, her name is Doc Alley. If you Google her, I'm sure she's easily going to come up on whatever Google search that you find her under. But she's kind of been known as one of the long-standing gymnastics mental performance coaches out there. So she was out there. I remember listening to like she had a disc floating around, like literally a CD. I don't know if you guys listening know even what CDs are, but man, back in the day, like that's kind of how we listened to music and stuff. And so
Yeah.
there was a CD that I had borrowed from a teammate of mine. And I just remember it was some kind of guided visualization or guided meditation. That was her voice. But so I can't say that I directly worked with somebody like her. But I did have, she was really the main resource, at least back in the day. I'm thinking, let's say like this is 20 years ago at this
Hmm.
point. So this is a really long time. She's been around for a long time. But I guess the earliest that I did have someone who 100% is the reason why I have my job today and who impacted me the most. His name is Greg Harden. He's also quite famous, at least in like the Michigan athletics space. So University of Michigan, that's where I first met him and ran into him. And he's even had a 60-minute special on him when he was working with Tom Brady back at Michigan as well. So if you guys search Greg Harden, he's been a huge influence in my career. And I don't even think he knows it. I don't even know if he would remember me if someone asked him, "Hey, do you remember Briley Casanova?" He probably
Hmm.
wouldn't even remember me, but I remember him. And so, yeah, he was the first person that I actually worked with
Okay.
one-on-one in that respect.
Okay. Got it. And now, yeah, so like I guess when you look back into your time as an athlete, do you in the moment did you realize like how much pressure and stress and just like how much of a mental game it was? Or I think like for me, like I can reflect 10 years back and think like, oh my gosh, like whatever I was doing, if I was in sports or whatever pressure I was putting on myself, like I didn't realize in the moment how intense it was, but now I can look back and be like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. Like, do you ever have that kind of like perspective taking where you think like, oh my gosh, like I competed at like a very elite high top level and that was a lot for someone to go through at that time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, that's such a deep question.
Yeah.
And part of me, I feel kind of two minds about it. I think
Hmm.
part of me feels like yes, I can reflect back and like actually fully understand the amount of like I don't know if I would call it pressure. Maybe that's the word I'm kind of getting hung up on because I really didn't see it as pressure. I just
Okay.
saw it as like I completely wanted to do it. And I think that's the difference for me is I voluntarily willingly signed up to be a gymnast and my parents didn't make me do it. Now there were times where like if I wanted to quit, for example, I had a couple of those moments, mostly when I was younger, where they said, well, okay, you can quit, but just not right now. And for whatever reason, like you finish when you've had a good day, you finish when you've completed the season, like you have to finish your commitment. And then, okay, there's a time and place where you can quit and do something else. But I guess going back to like the feeling of like pressure, I honestly, I was probably the one that put the most pressure on myself. So I can't really credit
Mhm.
My stress to that 100%. But and so the other part of me is like, well, yes, I understand that I was put under like high expectations, yes, from other people and also myself. But the other part of me, you know, I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard for me to articulate, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm able to answer that question super clear, but I guess to put it short, yes and no. Like
Yeah.
I think what overshadows it really is the fact that I love the sport so much. So I didn't see it as some kind of like burden,
Mhm.
you know. I just saw it in a different way, and I think because I loved competing so much, that made it all worth it. Now I will say I was the type of athlete where, because I liked competing so much, I didn't necessarily like the practice so much.
Okay.
So like the daily grind, that was the harder part for me. But by the time you got me to meet season, like I was so excited and happy, and yes, nervous, but like I always saw it in a good way, you know.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
That does. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and with how much you loved the sport and how much of a passion you had for it, once your career ended, what was that transition like?
Now that's an interesting question too, because I will say I had a very non-standard or non-traditional, I don't know if that's a fair word to say, but like I had a kind of a unique experience with how my career ended. And I guess I'll give a little backstory because I promise it all kind of comes together. But
Mhm.
the way my career, I guess let's just say, started to end, the beginning of the end. So I went to the University of Michigan a semester early compared to my peers. But yeah, so anyway, so I graduated high school on December 12th, 2012. And then I flew to the University of Michigan to start my academic and athletic career on Christmas Day of 2012. And so my first competition with the team was like January 2nd of 2013. So the way my college career started was already in itself very unique,
Mhm.
and not I can't necessarily say most people share that experience or maybe relate to that very well. But anyway, all of that to say, why we went about it that way was because when I was in high school, I had enough credits to where I could do that. I could graduate early, and in my head and in my family's mind, and in my, just big picture, we were thinking, oh, well, that means if we get her started, basically a semester early in college, that's one less year of wear and tear on her body.
Mm.
So all of that, to say, fast forward 4 years to 2016, and I'm in my last season at the University of Michigan. So it's January. The gymnastics season is January to like April, right? So it's the
Okay.
spring semester, and so it's my senior semester. And then like I managed to compete a couple of meets, maybe let's say like a handful, maybe no more than 5 meets, but then all of a sudden my back starts hurting. And then, a couple more, I feel it in practice. I'm like, okay, this is, it's nagging, it's annoying, but I'll try to keep working through it. It wasn't anything serious at the time. But then all of a sudden, like, I think I managed to make it one more week. So one more away meet, all of a sudden my right leg goes numb, and I can't walk, I can't function, I can't run, I can't jump, I can hardly move. Like, I'm in so much pain. And it turns out I herniated my L5S1, which is basically your tailbone,
Mhm.
which is why, my whole right leg goes numb, and I can't function. I go from a hundred, level 100, 21-year old, best shape of her life, to like basically not able to function as a human being. I'm
Yeah.
bent over, a chair or a table because like I can't walk because I'm in so much pain. And then basically all of that to say, that was the moment where my gymnastics career was sufficiently ended. I couldn't heal from that. It was bad enough to where I couldn't get back surgery, but it was also bad to the point where I couldn't perform. Like, I could hardly walk, and I was in so much pain. So didn't get the surgery, but my coaches and I were hoping that my back would heal. It turns out it didn't. So, however, in terms of the transition part of your question, I still had a whole half year left of college before graduating, which was, looking back, a blessing. It was the best thing because while I couldn't do gymnastics anymore, I could still be a college student. I
Yeah.
was still taking classes. I was on track to graduate on time for me, which obviously is great. And what I ended up doing my last semester, so in the fall of my senior year, I joined the ballroom dance team at the University
Okay.
of Michigan. And so that was honestly my other saving grace, because by that time I had all these months where I was just doing like literally nothing. I could hardly work out, but my back did start to feel a little better. I was still in pain, but like at least I was doing really basic dance moves. Like we're not talking like flips and flying and like twisting and stuff. Like these are just basic ballroom dance steps, with a
Hmm.
partner. So I'm not being thrown around. It's not making my back any worse. So I was still able to have fun and do something competitive. I went to a couple of competitions that year too, and it kind of filled that last little need that I had to finish my college experience and my athletic experience on a high note.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of my transition, I have to say I was like forced to transition. I didn't get to
Hmm.
just have that senior day experience where you have like one of the best meets ever. My body just told me it was done, and that's honestly the best way I think it could have gone. And I'm actually so grateful that that was the way it happened, as opposed to me graduating and then still being in college and not being able to do gymnastics. Although I'm a perfectly healthy person, I think that honestly would have made me a lot more upset and potentially depressed. So long-winded answer, but that's my answer.
That's a very interesting answer.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so it was just really interesting to hear kind of you explain the process and how your transition out was, and like how you said that it ended up being kind of, a better situation almost than what could have been, because it led me to think, as you were talking about it, like, did it give you sufficient closure? Like not being able to really end on your own terms.
Yeah, honestly, I can say in my experience, yes, that was the best way for it to go. Like it's
Hmm.
almost better that it wasn't my choice,
Yeah.
And I knew, I mean, of course, I think for the most part college athletes know that their time's going to come to an end. Like there is hardly any opportunity for a to be a professional gymnast, and even if it was there, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go that route. I mean, I know other sports have different, goals and experiences, but at least I knew my gymnastics career was going to come to an end at some point, and that point was either going to be that year, or god forbid if I was able to heal or like take a fifth year, like maybe the next year. So my timeline for which I was going to continue the sport regardless was going to be very short anyway.
Right.
So that was a huge blessing, and again, I'm just so grateful it happened that way. Like
Yeah.
I'm very happy with it, to be honest. I have no regrets, and I know I did what I could. I left everything out on the floor, and my body just decided it had been through enough. So I can't be mad at that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And you talked about how you went to the University of Michigan and you had to, you graduated and you flew out to U of M in Ann Arbor. What what led you to U of M in the first place?
Yeah, and to put it really simply, I mean, it was the mix of both high level academics and
Hmm.
athletics. And I really took the title of student athlete seriously. There's a reason why I wanted to be called a student athlete and not an athlete student. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the whole, I guess, marketing that they tell you to, and I bought into it. I bought into wanting to be like, I wanted a school on my resume that I was going to be proud of, first and
Yeah.
foremost for academics. Second came athletics, always. And I had to bust my butt and grind to graduate. I will say I wasn't the smartest person in the room, but I'm just glad that I got to graduate from a high level university. And I knew that they had a great psychology department too at the time, and even years afterwards, they were constantly and consistently ranked number one in terms of their psychology department and psych program. So I knew I wanted to be in that field one way or another. I just maybe didn't necessarily know in what capacity. So
Right.
with all that said, I mean, it was a great academic and athletic program, and I wanted the best of both worlds. I didn't want one to outweigh the other. I wanted both.
I love that. I think that's super important because, like, kind of like you clearly stated in your last kind of response about the end of your career and transitioning out, like most college athletes, usually that's kind of where their career ends, right? Like there's definitely
Yep.
some that go professional, but like there's life after the sport. And I think sometimes we forget that and don't really kind of plan accordingly, right? So the
Yeah.
student aspect of getting your education, getting it from a reputable, like, prestigious university and having a plan like you have yourself and like you focus on. I think that that's important and something that, like, even if you're the most talented athlete in the world, like you never know when that career might end. So like
Right.
it's important to think about kind of what else you could do or what else you enjoy doing.
Right. Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that you always knew that psychology was something that interests you, just maybe not necessarily what in kind of what realm or how you would take that. When did that like psychology interest kind of form, or when did you know that that's what you wanted to study academically?
Yeah, and I think initially, I had been through a lot as an athlete, and I felt very passionately about body image, and I
Hmm.
know that that's more of a clinical kind of way. It's a clinical part of the psychology field, and I wanted to use my unfortunate negative view of myself and the growth that I had to make with that very personal topic, and I wanted to find a way to make athletics better in terms of changing that narrative for at least young female
Hmm.
gymnasts specifically, but young female athletes in particular. And I know men, young men experience that too, especially in sports like wrestling, other aesthetic sports, bodybuilding and all of, I know men experience it too. And
Hmm.
which further, like, it just strengthened my, it, I don't know. It just made me want to be a part of that and almost advocate in terms of what if that meant counseling or research. Again, I wasn't quite 100% sure about that, but I knew I wanted to do something with my personal experience and help make the sport and sports at large better and move forward from that just antiquated mindset of being as small as possible or maybe achieving being small in very unhealthy ways. So that was the initial thought, but then I will say what sharpened my focus even more was after meeting Greg Harden. I mean, that
Okay.
man, I just can't credit him enough. He completely changed my life. And what he did for me, I realized I wanted to be that person for someone else. So that really and wanted that drove my end goal and is literally the reason why I'm sitting in this chair talking to you today is because of him.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he was just really influential and just like a really just sharp mind and great individual. So that's really cool to hear about. And it might sound weird to say this, but I'm happy that you're in the place that you are and you have the focuses that you do, even though, you like you said, you had your own personal struggles and experiences that kind of led you to this path. I mean, like obviously I'm not happy that you had those experiences, but they led you to where you're at. And I think that it's a fantastic place. And just the conversations I've been fortunate enough to have with you, off record,
Yeah.
I can tell how passionate you are about these things, and just it feels like such a natural fit for you. And I
Oh.
know that you're making an impact on many people, and I think that that's a great just place for you to be.
Well, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate that, and I
Yeah,
think it's funny because just like the things I would tell my athletes, I've had to force myself to learn personally too. And
yeah,
I think that's the most beautiful thing about the work that I do is like I learn so much from my athletes, tips, tricks, strategies, mindsets, approaches. Um, it's been like such a privilege being in other athletes' worlds and like I guess a kind of, a very intimate way. I'm not so the thing with my job, and I think it's easily confused, is the fact that I'm not a counselor. I'm
right.
not a licensed clinical practitioner. I'm not a doctor. I don't diagnose or treat any like mental illness or diseases of any kind. I don't again, I don't prescribe medication. I don't deal with mental illness. However, I deal with mental health
Yeah,
and all the things that I've had to learn to teach my athletes. My athletes have like I've learned, I will say, I think I've learned more from athletes and other mental performance practitioners and like the real world, so to speak, versus like the things I learned in a classroom. And I've
yeah,
learned just more from like the lived experience compared to like the thing. Now, I'm not saying my degrees are not worth anything and that I didn't learn anything. Like I learned basic fundamentals and like the language of, you know, talking to people and articulating thoughts, but beyond that, I think the most memorable things I've learned are outside of the classroom, which is I think so interesting and kind of funny to think about, but it's just the truth in my experience.
yeah. I mean, I that resonates with me, and I'd agree. I mean, like again, I think that like you said, my degrees are very beneficial and they're great, but really the outside real world practice and applications and working with other folks in the field or what have you, I think that's really where you get that skill set and really are able to fully understand what you do, especially when it is kind of in like that mental space.
Hmm.
getting my bachelor's in psychology and then my master's in HR, like HR, there's quite a bit of crossover, and especially the degree specifically that I got. But
Sure.
like in my role now, it's really like kind of seeing it come to life, and
Hmm.
it's kind of funny because like yourself, I am not a licensed, mental health practitioner by any means. I'm not
Yeah.
even a certified like mental performance coach by any means, but being in my HR role, like I talk to my staff all the time about their performance and how to overcome obstacles and just like
Sure.
mental health and everything. And like I have so many people that like will say like, "Oh, I'm gonna go talk to my therapist," and like they're referring to me, and I'm like, "No, I'm not your therapist. I am not a
Right.
counselor. I am not able to diagnose or treat anything. I am just here
Yeah.
to talk about work and performance."
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the difference between, and that's why, and that's why I wanted to go the applied route. Like, I
Yeah.
feel, not to say, again, not to say that research isn't valuable or important.
Right.
I don't want to be the one in the classroom or doing the research studies. I'd rather read the research and pass along what I've learned from research to
Exactly.
people in the real world.
Yeah.
I want to work with the athletes. I want to work with the, the business owners, the CEOs,
Mhm.
the Air Force, and an army and like navy. Like, I want to work with the guys on the ground,
Mhm.
so that's the other thing that led me here is, both that personal experience but just that desire to like almost, like, because I knew I could be a coach. Like, that's kind of the standard, I think, route a lot of athletes take when they're done with their careers, to stay connected to the
Yeah.
sport, because that's kind of you either become a coach or a judge, and
Yeah.
neither of those things I just didn't see myself doing. I think those are just very, very, like, honestly, like, my job I think is easier compared to what those guys do. Like, being a
Yeah.
coach of like tons of athletes day in and day out in the gym and sweating with them, and then on the other hand, being a judge and watching all those routines and having to make such like quick decisions about, how an athlete performed, like that to me is a lot more pressure than, what I do. Not to say that it's not a lot of pressure, but it's just
Right.
different, and so my way of giving back to the sport is doing this kind of work, just a little more behind the scenes, and I get a ton of satisfaction out of it. But yeah, that's kind of another aspect of I guess what brought me here.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective to hear about, and I definitely can see how it is kind of that element of like giving back to the sport. And I
Hmm.
mean, obviously, the sport was a huge part of your life, and just being a competitor and just kind of sharing that knowledge in the applied sense, I think is really beneficial. And you, again, you're making a difference by kind of passing on that knowledge, and I think that that's really profound that you're able to do that.
Well, thank you. I mean, that means a
Yeah.
lot to me because, and a lot of times, so my student pilots, like, I get to see them in person,
Hmm.
every day. Now, my gymnasts and my athletes, I work with them virtually, and so I'm
Yeah.
not with them in the gym every day. And a lot of times, I don't see or hear about, the improvements they've made unless they tell me. But like, I don't see film of them. I don't see tape. I don't see them in the gym. Like, I don't get to like hear or see much feedback other than like the short amounts of time that I get to talk to them virtually. So I really hope, I guess, just to go off of what you said, like, I really hope that I'm making some kind of impact, because a lot of times I don't see it.
Yeah.
If you're a coach, on the other hand, you get to see that, in real time. So that's the only, I guess, the hope that I have for my athletes and anyone who, I work with or talk to, or just meet with at all. I hope I'm making an impact. So thank you. Like, that's such a high
Yeah.
compliment. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
Of course. And I mean, for what it's worth, like anytime that I've had a conversation with you, this conversation we're having right now, listening to one of your podcast episodes, like you have had some sort of impact on on myself, my life, my situation, whatever the case may be. So I can guarantee you that like you impact people in the way that you talk and the way that you present yourself and the knowledge that you have and the background that you have. So you're definitely making a difference. Like I can speak, I feel like I can speak for many people when I say that.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Zach. I mean, that means a lot to me.
of course.
You leave me speechless.
So on the topic of podcasts, since you are a fellow
Sure.
podcaster,
Sure.
how's that journey been for you? Like what made you want to jump into that?
Oh man, and I was almost a little fearful you'd bring up that question, because I will be honest, I have been so behind on that. I guess,
Sure.
looking back to your time management question, or what do I do in my free time? Normally in my free time I would be dedicating a lot of it to my podcast, but lately I have not been. And I guess part of that's been due to I just bought a house, so last several months were spent.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been quite a journey to say the least, but that's taken up a lot of my time lately. But yeah, how I got into it, that's such a good question. Honestly, if you had asked me when I first started it, I'd probably have a better answer for you. But I think looking back when I started, it was right before COVID, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
It was either right before or like right after it like just kicked off. But I had known I wanted to do it for a long time because what I used to do was I used to have a blog, and then after a while, like it just got emotionally hard, like trying to think of things to write. And I would
Mm-hmm.
get to the point where, like, I don't know if you experienced this whenever you like had to write an essay in college, but I got to the point where I was trying to edit as I went, and it became just like I would think myself out of writing a blog post, and it got too difficult for me.
Yeah.
And so I figured, well, I want to still have some kind of outlet to express myself and help others. So selfishly, I think what first got me started was I just needed an outlet. I needed a way to
Mm-hmm.
express myself without feeling judged. And then but it turns out I was the one judging myself before I even posted what I wanted to post. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to try a different platform, a different avenue. And I learned about just podcasting because I had listened to a lot of podcasts. I watched a lot of YouTube, for years and years. I've
Mm-hmm.
been a casual listener and viewer. So I was like, well, why don't I get in on it, even if it's bad, even if I don't do it frequently? Like I knew I wasn't going to do it for money and do it for a job. So I figured I have nothing to lose. And so I found Anchor, found this platform because it was free and it was attached to
Mm-hmm.
Spotify. And honestly, the logistics of it all worked out on top of like my desires. So
Yeah.
not really the most fascinating story there, but I think that's the best way I could put it.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a good answer. And I think it's interesting because you said kind of almost selfishly it came out of just wanting a place to express yourself. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I get asked like the same question, and my answer is also like I always kind of say like selfishly, this is my reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me it was just like, so every episode I have someone on. I have a guest like yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
like I grow and learn so much from every conversation and from
Mm.
everyone that I have on. So it was like selfishly, like I just want to learn and grow and just like get to know these wonderful people that have done or are doing incredible things and chasing their passions, because that kind of gets me fired up. So yeah, it's cool to be able to listen and then to like share that. So I think
Wow.
sometimes our ideas come out of like selfish, like initial pursuits, but like
Sure.
there's so much more to it, right? Like that's not the only reason we do it, but it's
Yeah.
definitely like, and there's no shame in it. It's not like bad to say like, oh, well, like I did it because it was best for me, because
Yeah.
we have to do, what's best for us at times and take care of ourselves.
Right, that's right. I'm a
Yeah.
fan of, the whole put your mask on first before you help somebody else. You have to do it. And whether that's emotionally,
Hmm.
spiritually, nutritionally, physically, whatever, you have to take care of you. And if this is your way of doing that, that's a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad that you got into it too, because now, I mean, I don't think I know. I mean, the only people that I know that have a podcast are like in, my mental performance space,
Hmm.
but like it's like my director of the company I work for and, just the people that I guess I follow. But I'm glad to know that I have an actual, like a friend, who does
Yeah,
this too. And that's really fun. And it's a good way to connect with people. It sounds like you like talking to people, Zach. I, I
I
mean,
do.
I mean, you must love talking to people.
I do. I'm one of those wild extroverts who like loves talking to people and will like go up to strangers, and I'll go like get an ice cream and end up talking to the
Oh
person
my
for like
gosh.
30 minutes about life.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You know what you could do? I'd be curious like how you would do. Like those guys just on the street with a microphone asking people questions. Like I feel like you would
Yeah.
thrive doing that.
Oh, you're giving me so many ideas.
Oh my gosh, that's what I'm saying. Like you could do with this podcast, like you could literally stand on a street corner if you live in a busy area, like, or I
Mhm.
mean, maybe if you have to drive to a busy area, but like
Yeah.
you could like literally stand there with a microphone and be like, hey, what do you think of it? Like ask people questions. Like that's something I watch on YouTube all the time, and it's
Yeah.
funny because like that when as you were describing like your why behind this, like that's immediately what I thought of. Like there's a particular person I follow on YouTube who does that, or I guess did that, and
Yeah.
like it's amazing. Like you will get some really interesting answers and like from all different kinds of people too,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. I might have to do
Just an
this
idea.
weekend.
Don't put pressure on
I'll
yourself.
like I'm like 30 minutes from Detroit and 30 minutes from Ann Arbor, so those are two major cities where
Oh my gosh. you
I
could
could
do it.
easily just yeah. Wow, okay. Okay,
Oh my
so
god.
to everyone that like when there's no more podcast episodes, it's because now I've transitioned and now I'm just standing on street corners talking to strangers and passerbys.
Well,
And
hey, you could record that and put it
that's
up
true.
on either on Anchor or YouTube.
That's
Like
true.
people do it. So that's what I'm saying. Like monetize it. Like
Yes.
make it your thing.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I'm just waiting to like just give me like a couple of years and you'll like be watching like I don't know like the Late Show or something or the Tonight Show and you'll just be like, wait, is that Zach? Like
Yeah, no,
just talking on the
exactly.
corner.
100%.
Okay.
100%. You never know what could happen.
Yeah. No, you're very right on that. And it's funny that you kind of like pegged me for that because that's definitely my personality. And like I just like to me, the purpose of life is just like human connection and connecting with people. And I think
Ooh.
every day we have that opportunity, and everyone we encounter and every situation we're in is an opportunity to learn if
Mm,
we are
mhm.
open to that, you know what I mean? And I think that that's just like the beauty of life. Just like it can be tough and it can be intimidating, and especially like after coming out of a couple of years of lockdown and
Yeah.
having to be socially distant and like being indoors and virtual, like it can be hard to come back to like a more social world. But I
Yeah.
don't know, I find so much just like joy coming from it.
Oh, that's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah. So I kind of want to spin that question or spin like kind of that topic onto you. Now you have a
Okay.
podcast. You work with a lot of people through coaching and through
Mhm.
kind of the application based of psychology. So would you say that you're like an extroverted personality and you're kind of similar to what I'm expressing, or would you say that you're actually maybe the opposite?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely both. Like I can
Okay.
turn it on. Like I can totally turn it on. Oh my gosh. And I used to be for a couple years in staffing and recruiting
Right.
full time, before I got this full-time role that I have now.
Yeah.
So like I know when to turn it on. I can do it, but I will say when I'm done with that, like I shut down. I need to
Okay.
recharge my battery. Like I'm very I guess what do they call it? Like an ambivert,
Yeah.
you can do both. That's the thing. I can do both. I feel like I naturally, if you're asking true natural Briley without the influence of the world on her, I would prefer to be an introvert, but I've
Mm.
learned that for what I want to do for work, for
Yeah.
how I need to live and conduct myself in a professional manner, I do need to, be a little more extroverted. So it's not necessarily a demand I would willingly place on myself, but I can rise to the occasion and I can do it. But I need my recharge time. I need to be
Yeah.
alone. I need to like just sit. My favorite thing to do, like if this gives you any indication of like who I am, this is the exact opposite of an athlete, but like my favorite thing to do is absolutely nothing. Like I'm talking
Yeah.
sit on a couch, stare at a wall, and like just have like white noise playing or just like music in the background. Like I will literally listen to. I have a record player in my house, and so I literally bought the record player as a thing to have just background noise when I just like to sit on my couch and do nothing. So if that tells you anything about me, that's kind of what that's who I am naturally. But like I understand I can't just live like a hermit every day.
Sure.
I have to put myself in the public eye and work
Yeah.
with people. So that's me.
Okay. I love it. And I don't know, I just find that, like, really interesting because, like, I would just say, like, I'm 100% always just an extrovert, like, that's
Yeah,
just I can't
for
control
sure.
that, like, that's just who I am, but, like,
Fair
at the same
enough.
time, like, I love that kind of, like I guess we'll call it solitude, but, like,
Yeah.
it's not like for me, it's never like I need to recharge or anything, it's just that, like, I
Mhm.
enjoy it, like, I enjoy my
Yeah.
own company, I guess, and
Yeah.
what you said really resonated with me because, like, people like, I'll say, like, "Oh, I'm just, like, chilling out for the night or something," and people are like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, I'm literally just sitting in silence," and they're like,
Yeah.
"No, like, you're watching TV, you're on your phone, you're reading a book." I'm like, "No, like, I am
Yeah.
sitting on my couch," probably, like, similar to you, like, maybe I have, like, some white noise, like, background
Yeah.
going on, but I'm literally just sitting and like, staring at a
Sure.
wall or staring off.
Sure.
I've
Or
never
like
heard anyone else
or
say that.
reading. Like
Yeah.
I read, I try
Okay.
to always have a
Yeah.
book. Like I always try to have a book or two that I'm reading.
Yeah.
So like I consider that. I mean, I don't know. Like of course I sit and scroll on my phone too, but like
Sure.
I don't know. I don't spend a ton of time on my phone unless it's
Yeah.
like emails or like if
Right.
I'm on social media, I post where I need to post and then I leave. Like
Yep. Yep.
I don't read all the comments. I don't know, and I don't comment on a ton of things that I
Yeah.
see. Like I just, I'll sit and like listen to a podcast or sit and like
Yeah,
read or sit and watch a YouTube
exactly.
video. But yeah, no, and I totally respect that. And I think, they say like the most successful people in the world tend to be extroverted. Like that is a human trait that tends to get people really far. And clearly using this platform is going to help you go so far like in your career, and it's just going to add and enrich your life. So you're doing the right things, obviously. So just, yeah, like channel that and keep leaning into it, because that will lead you to success. If you're living as authentically as you can, you will become successful. I mean, you're already successful, so like who am I even to say like you're going to become successful? Like you
Yeah,
already are. And so I think, and that's something like if we're talking about like things I would tell athletes, like
yeah.
that would be part of it. So like just keep living your truest extrovert self.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the kind words.
Of course.
I really do appreciate that. And as a fellow like psychology student or someone that is passionate about psychology, are you familiar with the psychologist Sydney Gerard?
Sydney Gerard. No, I can't say I haven't heard of her. I'll have to look into her.
It is a him. I will say
Oh,
that.
him. Oh, I'm
It
so
is, yeah,
sorry.
Sydney's a
There,
him, but
there I go assuming. Oops.
it's all good. It's all good. But Sydney Gerard is probably my favorite psychologist. And the
Okay.
reason behind it is his kind of theory of like we all just want to be our authentic selves, and we kind of live a life where we have like a mask, and we put on that mask in like social situations or with friends or family, and
Hmm.
it's not like inauthentic, but it's not our 100% like unapologetic authentic being, and that's like what we all
Sure.
strive and aspire to live. And I think kind of like you were saying with like the advice that you would tell your athletes is just like be yourself and be authentic. I think that's so important. It's
Hmm.
so tough, and especially like nowadays with, maybe you and I aren't big social media people, but like social media makes it hard,
Yeah.
I think, for folks to be themselves because of all like the, just comparison and judgment and what have you. So I think, yeah, to
Sure.
anyone listening, that's like, I think, big advice that both of us would give. Just like be yourself and like just do what makes you happy. And like some people might not agree with it or might think it's silly or weird, but like
Yep.
who cares?
Yeah. Well, and like bringing that into like, I will say, I don't know if you've ever had this experience with your podcast, because I know you have guests, and
Hmm.
I don't. Like, I think I've only had maybe one guest on my podcast the entire time I've had it, and she was a friend, so she made it easy. But I noticed sometimes I catch myself still with like I feel like I have really strong opinions about certain things related to sports,
Yeah.
mental performance and things, and I catch myself sometimes. I get worried about, well, if I share this opinion, like who's gonna stop listening to me after this, or
Hmm.
who's gonna just write me off, and who's gonna judge me, and like who's gonna like think differently. I go through all those questions before, and it's funny, I have a podcast that I have coming up that I've completely planned it out. The notes are written, like I'm ready to go. The last thing I have to do is just record the dang thing.
Yeah.
So, but part of me has hesitated for so long, not just because it you know I don't know, it just took me a while to prepare, but also I've kind of put it off because I am a little nervous about like if I share this really strong opinion, like what are other people going to think? Like, are people going to like it? Are they going to hate it? Or is it going to be 50-50? Like, I don't want to, I don't want to upset people, and I
Hmm.
guess if we're talking about being our authentic selves, I am genuinely, naturally, like I've always been a very happy person. It's kind of hard to bring me down, but the minute I disappoint somebody, or the
Yeah.
minute I make somebody else uncomfortable or angry, or whatever negative emotion you want to put out there, like that makes me feel bad. And that can be a blessing and a curse, right? Because I do think it's important to like, you know be kind to others, like,
Yeah.
try not to hurt other people's feelings if you can avoid it. But if that's hindering me from being myself, that's when you run into like the catch 22, right?
Yeah.
The it hurts you both ways. So maybe my challenge in following through with your advice and what I would tell somebody else is I need to just put your this is the world telling me that I need to just post this dang podcast, this next
Yeah.
episode that I have. So you're inspiring me, Zach. Like I'm so glad you're asking these questions because it's really making me think.
Good, good. No, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I try not to make you think too hard on podcasts or any guests, but I like to ask questions that make you think or just kind of like reflect upon. And I think I'm the same way, and it's I've told you this before, and like it just this recording's echoing it in my mind that like I feel like you and I were like the same person.
Yeah,
And it's
I
really
think so
funny.
too.
Even like our interests that we haven't even talked about, or like things that we like to do in our free time. It's eerily similar. But
Totally.
I'm the same way where like I I hate the feeling of letting someone down or disappointing someone or making someone feel, like, uncomfortable about something I say or, like, a belief I have or whatever the
Yeah,
case may be, like you explained. And it's tough because you're trying to, like, balance that fine line of, like, being your authentic self, but, like, wanting to, like, take other people's feelings or emotions or
right,
reactions into account. And I think, like I guess I'm
right.
curious, like, how have you navigated through that?
Oh, I think honestly, like just taking risks. It
Yeah.
like and the whole thing and that's the whole thing with the podcast for me. It's 100% a risk. And I will say, thank goodness that I don't have a big audience because luckily enough, I don't have a ton of people like, screaming at me or yelling in my ear or like giving me, tons of feedback at all anyway.
Mhm.
So it really is kind of like the opportunity I have to kind of shout out into an almost empty void. I mean, I think so, like I look at my stats and there's like a couple people listening to it, but it's really not a lot. And I don't get I don't get a ton of like direct feedback. So that's almost a good thing for me. And I think that's been a really good thing is being able to just share what I want without having a huge audience. And that's, again, some people might look at that and think, oh, well, you're doing something wrong. But like, I really don't think I am. Like, I would much
Mhm.
rather it be this way than having too many opinions because that's where I also get thrown off is like if I have too many opinions and too much feedback it's really hard for me to make a decision. Whereas if it's just me and I have my time and my thoughts and my experience and I just go from that, speak from that, act in service of that, like that's kind of helped me keep putting out episodes and keep, doing this work. And look, and if someone ever calls me out, like I will be prepared for that day. Like I will arm myself and be open to hearing new perspectives. But I just hope that the delivery is always in a kind way because like that's how I try to
Mhm.
deliver my message is not in a hateful way. But I am very passionate and I do have strong opinions on some things. And I'm very decisive. So I just try to lean into that. And then also on the receiving end, if someone were to ever criticize me, I hope that I would be able to handle that, with strength. So I hope that, I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely, and I really appreciate and respect you saying that, like, if someone does disagree or have feedback, like, you're open to it. I think that's the biggest thing, like,
Yeah.
I think that's where we kind of unfortunately face a lot of struggles in the world and in society
Hmm.
when people do have opinions and they're not open to hearing like, you don't have to
Yeah.
change your opinion, but at least be willing to, like, respectfully listen or just acknowledge that there are other opinions as well, and that they're not, like,
Sure.
less or anything, it's just maybe you don't agree with them, that's okay.
Yeah, just different. And I
Yeah.
think what ruins it for people, like, I mean, social media, you brought that up, social
Mhm.
media, like people, it's so easy to like type something vicious behind a keyboard,
Right.
when you're not directly in front of the person. But I imagine a lot of the things we would say online, we wouldn't necessarily say in person. And so I try to temper that. And that's why I try to, you know, I don't know. I don't know really where I was going with that, but I think the delivery of how people disagree also ruins it for people. And it doesn't have to be that way,
Right.
Um, I just don't think it has to be that way. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I agree completely with you, and, yeah, I think it's just technology, it's a blessing and a curse. It's great,
sure,
but
sure.
it can cause a lot of friction and divisiveness, and I don't know, maybe this is, like, the super extroverted part of me, but I'm just like, "Let's all just get along and be happy." Like
Yeah. Yeah, like I think we can all live with different viewpoints and
Yeah.
different like that speaking of like success, I mean, and that's like the big thing I want all of my athletes to feel and achieve at some point in their lives, whether it's their athletic journey or beyond their athletics. Like there are multiple ways to become successful,
Yeah,
just as there are multiple ways to communicate with people efficiently, effectively, respectfully.
for sure.
And we can all still have our beliefs, um, but that doesn't mean you can disagree with people without having to berate them, and so
Right.
I think I try to inject that into how I work with my athletes too, because I work with athletes that are much different than me. I mean, I have
Mhm.
athletes that are either young men or they do sports that I don't know a ton about, or maybe they don't want to do college athletics or they don't want to go to the Olympics, and they've already made that decision, or you know those are all these other things. Like I face that in my work all the time, and I'm sure you
Mhm.
work with people, in HR, and you see people that come to you with different, life experiences,
Right.
different, job titles, and responsibilities and all that. So, yeah, I think a lot of what we talk about in mental performance, it totally translates to life skills,
Yeah.
as well.
It really does, and I think, like, you hit on a lot of great life skills and just things that are important to have, and, something that also kinda resonated with me or just, like, kind of pinged in my mind is when you mentioned, like, the different forms of success, and, like, success
Yeah.
itself is such, like, a subjective thing, right? Like, your
Oh, for
definition of
sure.
success could be vastly different than mine, that's vastly different from someone else's, and it's like, I think
Yeah.
we all get caught up in, like, success has to mean, like, you're famous or you're making millions of dollars or what have you, but, like, I mean, I know you mentioned yourself, like, with your podcast, like, maybe you don't have, like, biggest platform or audience with it, but
Mhm.
I don't think that that means, like, you're not successful, right? Like, I think
Sure.
it sounds to me like you are successful because you are getting a lot out of it, and it is
Yeah.
having an impact on you in a positive way, and I think that that's success.
Totally. And yeah, I would just like just to like lean into that. Like how
Yeah.
I define success for my podcast is just honestly putting out an episode that like you can hear me speak. It's somewhat edited and somewhat put together
Yeah,
and I feel good about the message. That's
yeah,
it for me. Like honestly, if no one listens to it, I really don't care. Like
right.
honestly, the hardest part about the whole podcast thing for me is the editing anyway. So I respect the heck out of you for, editing and dealing with multiple people in a conversation because it's hard stuff and it's the stuff that
Yeah,
people don't see or hear that's the hardest part. So yeah, that's for me, that's what success is, at
yeah.
least related to my podcast. The fact that if I can put one out, man, that's good enough for me.
I love that. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a huge win, and I can't remember this exact statistic, so, anyone listening to this, don't quote me on this, but, one of my friends who's also a podcaster, he told me, like, it's something like 70 some percent of people that start a podcast don't make it past, like, 10 episodes.
Really?
Yeah, it's, like, something wild like
Oh,
that, and, like,
wow.
that, like, stuck with me, and, it's crazy, and, like, I know you're over 10, and I
Hmm.
am as well, so, like, we've
Hmm.
we've technically, beaten out, what the norm is in the podcasting world, and, it just starting a podcast or starting any
Yeah.
passion, I think is just a huge accomplishment, so,
Yeah.
kudos to you and me as well for accomplishing that, and I'll let you in on a little
Absolutely.
secret that because you gave me maybe too much credit. And so I actually don't do any editing for my podcast.
Oh my gosh, you
So
don't? Oh, good for
no,
you.
so
Even more respect though.
I'll so to anyone listening to this episode, I'll give a little backstory. I'll pull back the veil and be vulnerable. I'm gonna have to do some editing for this episode because we had some technical difficulties.
Oh my gosh, the one time you
Yeah,
were just talking about this. Yes.
yeah.
Oh man.
So
Ugh.
if you're listening to this podcast, like, and if you've listened to my podcast from the start, I'd always talk about how everything's unedited, unplanned, unscripted,
Oh my god.
and that everything with today was unplanned and unscripted. But due to technical difficulties, I will have to do some editing. It's probably not going to be the best editing because I don't edit. So I apologize if you made it this far. You're like the beginning, like the first like 20 minutes was kind of rough. Like, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best.
This is okay. Listen, to anyone who's listening, I'm going to
Yeah.
jump in here because this is Zach being really humble and nice and respectful to me because I think it was my fault. So, just so everybody knows, I was using my phone to record when I shouldn't have been. I think my phone kept running out of battery or like space or something. And every 4.5 minutes, like on the dot, it would just keep like kicking me out. So, I switched over to the computer and now
Yeah.
hopefully I will not make Zach's podcast editing a nightmare. Although it's already going to be a nightmare. So I had to throw that in. It's my fault. I take full responsibility and I apologize profusely. And Zach is just being lovely and kind about it. So we made it through though. Listen, I think
Yes.
we're doing a great job.
Yes. No, we are. And even though you're gonna fight me on it, you're not 100% responsible for it. We're a team, we're a joint effort.
Okay,
We're having fun and we're learning on the fly.
for
And
sure.
that's the whole fun of keeping things like the whole point of me starting my podcast was to make it like as like authentic and raw as possible. And that's just part of it. Like life happens to
Yeah.
go in directions and like one of the like recently I heard this expression or I guess quote perhaps that has really stuck with me and I just kind of find it a little humorous. It's like we make
Hmm.
plans and God laughs. And
Yep.
I
Yep.
just love that because that's like with anything like
Yep.
life, this podcast, like you make a kind of like, oh, this is how it's gonna work out or this is my plan for it, and then things don't always go according to plan and we just have to
Right.
adapt and move forward, and it's a good metaphor for life. So yeah.
Exactly. Good metaphor for life, and that's exactly what I would tell my athletes. Except I'm going to steal that. The whole you make plans and God laughs. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to show it my athletes because I think it's very similar to what I would share. Like if an athlete, when we're in our situation right now, their equivalent is, a piece of equipment breaks, or
Hmm.
they're tired or sore, or like not feeling their best, and they still have to perform. There are times when you don't get to walk away and you have to just get back up and keep going. And you are saying exactly what I would tell my athletes. So you are a lot closer to being a mental consultant, mental performance consultant than you think.
So my takeaway from this episode is quit my day job, stop the podcast, and become a mental performance consultant, and also go on street corners and talk to strangers.
Listen, Zach, if you do that, I will support you 100%, and you will make it happen. You will make it work. You can do anything. And I really believe that. I'm not just saying that to like pump rainbows into you. Like,
Yeah.
and that's my message for anybody, by the way. Like anybody, if you want to do something, you can do it. And that's exactly what I try to help my athletes work through.
Hmm.
And using more tangible things, tangible skills, written exercises and things. But genuinely, I think what you put into your life, you get out, and I think that's the message that I would want to share with everybody. With anything, what you get out is what you put in.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, like, there's just so much opportunity in life and opportunities and the passions that we have. And really, like, truly, whatever you put in, I think you can get out of it. And like,
Hmm.
I'm sure you'll probably even agree with me on this. Like, I don't, I do not see myself as like an extremely special, unique person. Like,
Hmm.
I've worked hard. I've set goals. I've been lucky at times, more times than
Sure.
not. And like, that's how I've accomplished the things that I've had. And to hear you say like I am successful or I will be successful, like I
Hmm.
really appreciate that, and that means a lot to me. But it's like if I can do it, I truly believe anyone can, and that's where I'm
Yep.
saying like I'm sure you probably agree. Like yes, you've
Yeah.
accomplished a lot in your personal life, but I don't from talking to you, I don't think you have this like complex where you're like, oh, I'm
Right.
super great and like I'm so special that like no one else can
Right.
achieve these things. Like I think that's the kind of the important message. Like we're just normal people that have done
Yep.
really cool things because of hard work and luck and dedication. And if we can do it, anyone listening can like really just get after whatever they want.
Yep. All of it. And I think it's funny. The last thing I guess I'll say
Yeah.
is the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yes.
So take that for what
Yes.
you will.
Yeah. I love that. And like that reminds me of a quote one of my old coaches used to say is luck favors the prepared.
It does.
So yeah.
Fortune favors the bold too.
Yes. Yeah. We're just full of all these quotes and expressions. I
Full
love
of
it.
them. Full of them. Absolutely. I'm all about cliches, and you know
Me
why?
too.
Because they are true.
Yes, that they wouldn't be called cliches if they weren't true.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Briley, I know that we've talked a lot about a lot of great things, and we've talked about the podcast, and you kind of dropped that maybe there will be an episode coming soon and everything. So,
Yes.
to everyone that's listened along with us, where's like the best places to check out the podcast or connect with you, or is there anything that you want to share with the listeners to kind of follow along with your journey?
Sure. Yeah. And you can find me, gosh, I'm almost everywhere. I'm all over the place. In terms of my podcast, I'm everywhere. Gosh, if you just look up Pursuing Excellence with Briley Casanova, it should come up. It's like a purple and beige, like diamond type
Hmm.
background. It's pretty easy, I would think pretty easy to identify. But again, just search Pursuing Excellence and Briley Casanova, my name, it should come up. It's on, Spotify, Anchor, iHeartRadio, literally Google, Apple, you name it, all the
Hmm.
podcast platforms. And then if you are an Instagrammer, my business Instagram is Mental Coach Briley. I'm on there pretty frequently, and also Twitter, or now X, I guess I should say, at
Yeah.
Mental Coach Bry. Again, I should be pretty easy to find there. But any feedback, comments, like please share them with me. I know I said I try not to spend too much time on those things, but please, genuinely, I want your feedback. I want to get better. I want to learn from you. And I just want to grow and improve. So those are my main platforms. And yeah, I guess if you want to set up a consult with me, if you're an athlete who's listening, or anyone who just wants to improve their craft, their, whether it's an athletic feat, or just a task or a hobby that you have, you can reach out to me and find me at completeperformancecoaching.com, and you can just search up my name, and you should find me under the coaches there. There's more than just me, but if you would like to schedule a free meeting with me, you are absolutely welcome to do that there as well.
Okay, perfect. So, all of Briley's information, where you can check out the podcast, her Instagram, I can't just say X. I'm just
I
gonna
know
call it
it's
Twitter. It's
interesting.
weird,
It's
but
weird.
Briley's Twitter/X. I'll put that in the description as well, as along with the website if you want that free
Great.
consultation. So to anyone listening, just go to the description of this episode and check out Briley's information there. And like you said, give her feedback. If you have any feedback or questions, comments, suggestions, what have you. I know that she's very open to
Yes.
getting feedback and hearing other people's perspectives. So definitely check her out. Follow her on socials, follow the podcast, tune in to the episodes. There's plenty to go back and listen to. When I first discovered your podcast, I literally went and I've listened to every single episode you've put out,
Oh my
and I will
gosh.
listen to them moving forward. So even if you forget about like Briley's Instagram or like the podcast, if you follow mine, I will share any
Oh
future
my god.
podcasts. So
Oh my god.
you can find it that way too. But
You're amazing.
well, thank you. So are you.
Thank
And I
you.
really appreciate this conversation. Is there any kind of like last thoughts or message that you want to share with our listeners?
Um, and as we were kind of planning this episode, I was trying to think of like that one last little message I would want to share. And
Yeah.
honestly, I'm really not sure. I guess it's just pursue excellence. Don't worry about trying to be perfect. That's the whole premise of why I named my podcast Pursuing Excellence, is because being excellent is being excellent. Being excellent
Hmm.
is enough. You don't need to be perfect. So stop, just stop. It's not, the pursuit of excellence is so fulfilling, and that's what I wish for everybody on our planet, and whoever's listening today. That's what I'll say.
That is a very powerful message and a great way to end it. And honestly, like even just sitting here, this is why I say like every time I listen to your podcast, I want to go run through a brick wall after I listen to it. Like you just have like this great way of articulating and
Oh
motivating.
man.
So I really
Whew.
appreciate it. And I think that's a great message. So everyone listening, pursue excellence. Know that like perfection isn't like a thing, right? Like,
I mean,
it's
it's just a very difficult endeavor, and
yeah,
most of the time you'll just feel disappointed and you'll feel
exactly.
worse. So it does not have to be like that. Life does not have to be like that. I
Mm-hmm.
think you can have fun in win too. You can have
100%.
joy. You can have joy and success. It doesn't have to be a miserable experience.
I agree. We get one life, and like let's make the most of it, enjoy it, and enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. And even while we're going for our goals and dreams and passions and working hard,
Yeah.
enjoy it. Enjoy it while you can. So it's
Yeah.
been a great conversation, Riley. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time and your friendship and just being able to every time I talk to you, I learn something or I take something away. So I really appreciate it.
Oh.
You've accomplished so many great things, and I know that you have a lot more left in the tank to accomplish. And I'm just honored to be able to share kind of like the podcasting space with you and to have so many great conversations. So thank you genuinely from the bottom of my heart for just having such a profound impact on my journey.
Oh
And
wow.
I'm just excited to see the other things that you accomplish and to support you along the way.
Oh, thank you. It's been an
Yeah.
honor and a pleasure, and I hope we can do this again, whether it's
Yeah.
on my podcast or on yours again. Like I want to keep this door open. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, 100%. You are always welcome to come back anytime on the podcast, and I'd be honored if you ever want me on your podcast. So I'm sure we'll make it happen. But it was great talking to you, and I know we'll be talking soon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you guys for listening.
Yes, of course. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.